Welcome to the next lecture on ecosystem, and in this lecture 4 we are going to continue our discussion on the basic concept, particularly emphasizing the major contributions by different components of the ecosystem, including the concept of species, the population, community, identifying the different components, the concept of biosphere and Gaia hypothesis, ecosystem definition, ecosystem function, and energy and nutrient flows, food chain and trophic level. So, ecosystem components. Ecosystem components are distributed into different categories. In a sense, with respect to macroecology in particular, we can identify that the species represent the fundamental component of the biotic part of the environment, and the species refers to the group of individuals, organisms basically, capable of interbreeding and producing fertile offspring. So, this definition is valid for sexually reproducing organisms, and of course, that then it is not true for the prokaryotic organism or the organisms who are incapable of sexual reproduction. So, species is defined like this. So, it is a group of organisms who are capable of interbreeding and producing the fertile offsprings. Population refers to group of individuals belonging to the same species occurring together in a particular space and time. So, ideally a population is represented by members of the same species. So, as we are discussing about the macroecology, so this concept is more true for the macroecology. So, in case of macroecology, the species are very well defined, and a group of organisms which belong to the same species are considered as the population. Now, community refers to all population occupying a given area, that is in a particular space and time, all the populations, and individually each of the populations are group of species or the members of the species who are all member of the same species, they are the population. So, all the populations together they represent the community. Now, community and the non-living environment, that is the abiotic the component of the environment, function together as an ecosystem, as we have learned in our earlier lecture. Now, the definition of the concept of the biosphere or the ecosphere. Now, biosphere or the ecosphere is the largest and the most nearly self-sufficient biological system, which includes all the earth's living organisms, interaction with the physical components as a whole, so as to maintain a steady state system. So, it is the entire planet Earth, it is considered as a biosphere, where all the biological components are continuously interacting with the non-biotic components of the planet, and they are maintaining a steady state within it. Now, the biosphere could be seen as interacting with many of its components, including the hydrosphere, that is the liquid water based component, the lithosphere, the cryosphere, atmosphere, etc. And all these components are closely tied together as a collection of different parts. So, the entire component is the biosphere, where we can see the hydrosphere, lithosphere, etc., etc. So, in any kind of environmental biotechnology study, wherever we need to consider or adopt a kind of a holistic approach to address any kind of issues within that particular environment, we have to keep in mind that all these interacting components, which are actually part of this or could be the part of this hydrosphere, lithosphere, atmosphere, and if applicable cryosphere, they are all intricately interrelated, and they are going to have a very strong influence and control over the function of that particular ecosystem. Now, in this respect, I would like to discuss briefly on a very important hypothesis on this biosphere, that is referred as the Gaia hypothesis, meaning now the Greek word Gaia refers to Mother Earth. It is proposed by Lovelock, and in the name for the Earth, which is envisioned as a superorganism. The entire planet Earth is considered as a superorganism engaged in all kind of biogeophysiology. So, all the functions, all the biological or the biotic functions that we see within this the planet Earth, considering its entirety, is actually considered within this Gaia hypothesis. And it is actually considered to be the planet Earth is, or the biosphere is considered to be a superorganism. And the goal of the superorganism is to produce a homeostatic or the balanced Earth system. So, in a larger scale, when we talk about the impact of the climate change or any kind of environmental biotechnology research which aim towards mitigating the challenges imposed by the climate change or other kind of pollution, environmental pollution, we need to understand that ultimately the planet Earth has its own homeostatic mechanism, and we need to understand at least part of that. And this Gaia hypothesis includes that all organisms within the biosphere, eukaryotic, prokaryotic, all kind of organisms, they not only adapt to the environment, but interact to modify and control chemical and physical conditions of the biosphere, that already we have discussed in our interactive space, that the organisms, they interact and they try to modify. And in his report, he has mentioned that living organisms and their material environments are tightly coupled, and this coupled nature acts as a superorganism. According to this principle of the Gaia principle, it proposes that the living organisms interact with their inorganic surroundings on the Earth to form a synergistic and self-regulating complex system to help to maintain and perpetuate the conditions for life on this planet. Now, we are going to define the term ecosystem. Living organisms and their non-living environment are inseparably interrelated and interacted upon each other. So, this is a very important statement, that living organisms, all the species member present in an environment, and their non-living or the abiotic components which are prevalent in that environment, are inseparably interrelated and interacted upon each other. That represents the interactive space. Any unit that includes all the components so that the flow of energy leads to clearly defined trophic structure, biotic diversity and material cycles within the system is considered as an ecological system or ecosystem. So, ecosystem is basically defined as an unit of any kind of environment where it includes all the components of the ecosystem that allows the flow of energy to the clearly defined trophic structure, etc. And these definitions we are going to have very soon, that defining each of these terminologies. Now, the concept of ecosystem provides a framework for understanding the flows of energy and elements between the organisms and the abiotic surroundings. Now, the component of ecosystems are highlighted. Now, based on the trophic structure, now the word trophy actually means in this case nourishment, that is, who is nourishing whom, that is the nutrients, how the nutrients are obtained by any organism. Based on that, the components of ecosystems are also divided. So, the autotrophic component and heterotrophic component, these are the two components which are very well defined in almost all the ecosystems, both in case of the macro ecological context as well as micro ecological context, that is the only focusing only on the microorganisms. There also we see that autotrophic and heterotrophic, as well as in macro ecological context also we see this autotrophic and heterotrophic system. So, the autotrophic components are capable of fixing the solar light, they are the photosynthetic organisms. So, most of the cases in case of macroecology, these are the plants and the photosynthetic green algae, etc. Whereas in case of the microecology, there are many autotrophic microorganisms who are, some of them are photoautotrophic, some of them are chemoautotrophic. So, they may not rely on sunlight always in case of a microecological context. So, we will talk about them during our later class when we talk about this specific group of organisms. However, this autotrophic component of any ecosystem, they use the simple inorganic substances. Okay. They acquire these nutrients from the soil or the water or from their surrounding environment, and through a series of metabolic reactions they build up the complex substances within them. Heterotrophic component is capable of utilization, rearrangement and decomposition. These are the three important properties of the heterotrophic component of any ecosystem. Now, utilization of what? Utilization of the complex substances which are already produced by the heterotrophic component, autotrophic components are utilized by the heterotrophic members. So, they not only utilize, actually they rearrange, because in the early steps of the oxidation of those substrates like the organic carbon, it may be cellulose, it may be some other organic components or organic compounds which are produced by the autotrophic organisms, they are oxidized, and they following oxidations the precursor molecules are produced, and they are again assimilated or they are processed to different type of anabolic reactions which are called rearrangement. So, as per the organism's requirement, they rearrange the precursor molecules and produce the own type of molecules which are required by that particular species. So, utilization and rearrangement, these processes are interconnected through the metabolism of the heterotrophic mode of nutrition. It also allows the decomposition of the complex materials, which often we see that many of the heterotrophic organisms, they just produce a number of hydrolyzing enzymes which are capable of depolymerizing or decomposing different type of complex materials, and the monomers or oligomers which are produced from these decomposition reactions are transported inside the heterotrophic organisms, and they are capable of utilizing it. So, maybe for particularly for the organisms which belong to the fungus or different fungal species, or many of the heterotrophic bacteria even can do that same thing. Now, with respect to structural components, we can identify that there are very well defined structural components conventionally, the abiotic or the physical chemical components and the biotic components. So, inorganic substances, organic compounds and different type of parameters which are included within the climatic conditions are all the members of the abiotic components of the ecosystem, whereas the different the autotrophic members which are considered as the producer because they produce the complex organic material. So, it may be autotrophic microorganisms, autotrophic plants, it may be photoautotroph in a macroecological system, or it may be the chemoautotroph in case of a microecological context. And then there are macro consumers and micro consumers. So, these macro and micro consumers are more relevant or more seen in case of macroecology. In case of microbial ecological system, we may not identify always these macro consumers and micro consumers. So, there are also different type of components in terms of the function of the different type of processes going on. So, we are now discussing the last type of categorization. So, one was the tropic level, the second one the structural, and the last one is the functional. Within the functional components, we can see there are energy circuits, there are food chains, there are diversity patterns in the time and space, because of with the change in the nutrients and the type of other stressors present within an environment, we can have the change in pattern, nutrient cycle, development and evolution, and the control by which the homeostasis is actually maintained within a given ecosystem. Now, all organisms which are present in an ecosystem, particularly in context to the if we refer to the macroecology, it will be more relevant, that all organisms could be grouped into several discrete categories. The first one is the producers, that is the autotrophic organisms, who are the photosynthetic plant, as well as the photo and chemosynthetic bacteria, as I mentioned earlier. They are constructing their bodies, and they are depositing the organic materials, organic compounds, organic substances which are synthesized from the inorganic carbon, that is the carbon dioxide, and other inorganic compounds generated or obtained from their surrounding environment. These organisms form the basis of food chain in any kind of, there are two types of food chain that we are going to discuss briefly, and any kind of food chain we found that these producers are the basic level of organism. They provide the food, that is the required nutrient for all the other type of organisms. So, it could be the green plants who are able to fix the carbon dioxide with the help of the solar energy, the moisture and the nutrients which are assimilated or acquired from the root system. They produce the organic material, and which is eventually consumed by all the heterotrophic organisms who are dependent on them. Now, in microecological context, we can see there are numerous microorganisms which are also capable of utilizing the carbon dioxide, utilizing the moisture or the water present, and they are capable of converting or transforming these gaseous carbon dioxide and the water vapor into organic compounds, and these organic compounds can be utilized by different heterotrophic members, including the heterotrophic fungus, heterotrophic different type of insects, the eukaryotic organisms, and even the higher animals as well. On the consumer category, we have the herbivores, which are again predominant or the member of the macroecology, the herbivores, which are the animals that consume the plants. Then the primary carnivores, which are the meat eating animals that consume the herbivores, and then the secondary carnivores that consume other animals. So, in some ecosystem we can find also the tertiary carnivore feeding on the secondary one. So, whether we have the primary carnivore, secondary carnivore or tertiary carnivore, it depends on the different type of ecosystem. So, some of the ecosystem might have only the primary and secondary, and some might have all three, or maybe something like that. And the fifth one, the fifth component is the detrivores and the decomposers. So, these are the organism, mostly the microorganisms, which are represented by bacteria, archaea and the fungi, as well as some of the small the protozoans or the protist animals. They are capable of utilizing the dead organic matter, that is the plant litter and animal residues, as the source of their energy and building blocks for their body. So, these organisms, the decomposers and detrivores, they do not rely on any green plants directly, but they indirectly rely on them, because they utilize the dead plant tissues, that is a plant litter, and enable the decomposition and the degradation of those plant material, that is the cellulose, hemicellulose kind of components, and also the animal tissues, that is the dead animal tissues, and they are capable of releasing organic the necessary organic materials, the nutrients, and acquire the energy by the oxidation of those compounds that is present in the plant litter and the animal residues. As a result of the decomposition, they release or rather mobilize inorganic elements from the dead bodies or the dead tissues and make them available for the plants to keep the primary production going on. So, it basically helps into the recycling of the nutrients, because plants acquire the nutrients, that is the inorganic nutrients, from the soil or from the soil system through their roots. Now, where from these nutrients are coming in the soil, because soil may not be having a kind of the perpetual access of these nutrients. It is the detrivores and the decomposers who are recycling, or who are supplying back the nutrients, the inorganic nutrients, particularly all the inorganic nutrients which are accumulated, deposited in the plant and animal tissues following the death or the decay of those plant tissues. These inorganic materials are released and they are made available to the plants, thereby they are helping into the recycling of the nutrients within the plants through the plant system. There is also another very interesting type of metabolism of the nutrition, which is called osmotrophic type of nutrition. In osmotrophic type of nutrition, the transporting they actually allow the transporting soluble nutrients through the cellular membrane. Mostly the microorganisms, particularly the fungal species, they are capable of doing this. So, insoluble substrates, for example, the lignocellulose and other insoluble organic matters, the oil and sulfur droplets, etc., they are converted to the different type of soluble forms with extracellular enzymes released by these microbes or these fungal species, and often the surfactants or different chelating agents are also involved, and they transport these nutrients through their cell membrane for their further processing through the metabolism. Now, the ecosystem function. We can see that within this ecosystem function there is a very discrete flow of energy. As you can understand that the solar energy for a macroecological context, or to some extent in the microecology also, where photoautotrophs are involved. So, producer organisms are the autotrophic organisms who are capable of converting the carbon dioxide, inorganic carbon, into the organic carbon, and they capture the solar energy. So, the energy gained from the sun is used to to reduce the carbon dioxide and produce the organic matter, which is eventually used by all the heterotrophic members. So, the autotrophic members, they are capable of performing a very important function, that is, they are utilizing the solar energy and they are converting the gaseous carbon dioxide into the organic carbon, which is then utilized by all the other members of the community, that is the primary consumer to the tertiary consumer. So, essentially none of these members included under the head of consumers are capable of accessing the energy available through the sunlight. So, it is only the autotrophic organisms who are capable of utilizing the energy available through the solar light, that is the photo energy, and then those energy which are available there, they are able to convert into the reduced organic matter. Now, the energy flows with the direction that from the producer to the consumer the energy flows, and we also know that at each level there is a substantial amount of energy loss, and eventually when the tertiary consumer is dead, the decomposers and the detrivores, they utilize the organic materials and the other materials available into that, and they try to oxidize most of it, but a large chunk of energy is eventually lost. But unlike that, the nutrients which are assimilated, the elements which are assimilated by the producer organism, like the green plants, because other than the energy which is captured and energy which is utilized to store and the chemical bonds and the chemicals which are eventually being oxidized by this consumer, a huge amount of inorganic nutrients are assimilated by the green plants. These assimilated nutrients are eventually transferred to the consumer organisms, and the consumer organisms, they utilize that, and following their death or decay of any kind of tissue, the decomposer and the detrivore organisms, they allow release of those nutrients, and then the nutrients are essentially coming back. So, one important message in this particular slide is that the flow of energy is unidirectional, whereas the flow of the nutrients are cyclic, because the energy is eventually going to be lost after the death of the organisms. At each level, huge amount of energy is lost, and finally after the death of this secondary or tertiary consumer, all the energy which is captured is essentially lost, most of it is lost. But the decomposer organisms, they are trying to utilize those organic materials, and particularly the nutrients are returned back into the system, and those returned nutrients can be again assimilated by the autotrophic organism, but the energy cannot be captured. Wherever the decomposers are there, decomposers are going to grow utilizing those energy, but they are not going to help us to return the energy into the system. So, the energy flow basically depicts that this particular slide depicts the loss of energy in each stage, and at finally when it goes to the heterotrophic organism, the most of the energy is eventually lost. Now, in a sense that the energy flow and nutrient mineral cycling, there is a progressive diminution of energy in the trophic chain, that we have understood that at each level some amount of energy is lost as heat energy, and also the oxidation of the materials which are processed at each step leads to some amount of energy wastage, and eventually all the energy which is assimilated by the plants are lost. The nutrient components, on the contrary, are not diminishing. Nutrients are not lost like energy, and after the death of the protoplasm, which is decomposed, and nutrients are released into the environment for their subsequent utilization by the plants again. Now, the food chain. Now, the transfer of the food energy, that is the energy which is gained by the autotroph or the producer organism and subsequently transferred to the consumer organism, that process is called the transfer of energy. So, the transfer of food energy in plants through a series of repeated eating and being eaten, because who is eating, that is the herbivores, will be eaten by the carnivores. So, through a series of repeated eating and being eaten is referred as the food chain. So, this transfer of energy, food energy within the autotrophic organism is eventually transferred to all the other members of the food chain. At each transfer, 80 to 90% of the potential energy is lost as heat. Now, eventually the shorter the chain or nearer the organism to the beginning of the chain, the greater is the available energy, of course, because the more the number of steps are there in between the transfer from the autotrophs to a particular consumer, more amount of energy is going to be lost. Food chains are not isolated sequence, interestingly, but are interconnected with one another. This interlocking pattern of food chains is called food web, because there are multiple food chains expected in any kind of environment. Okay? And all these many of these members, like the consumers, primary consumers and the secondary consumers, are often having different kind of their nutritional types. So you can find out that a large number of food chains are operating in any kind of ecosystem, particularly in a macroecological context, if we think of. So ideally it is going to be a food web. Now the trophic level. In complex natural community, organisms whose food is obtained from plants by the same number of steps are said to belong to the same trophic level. As I mentioned earlier, the trophy word means the nourishment. So how the organisms are nourished? Are they all in the same level when they are acquiring the nutrients, or they are being nourished? So like the green plants, they are first trophic level because they are the producer. So they are converting the solar energy and they are reducing the carbon dioxide into the complex organic matter. So they are the producer organism, whereas the herbivores are the primary consumers, and all the herbivores represent the trophic level. The organisms who are categorized at the first level of carnivores, that is they are consuming or dependent on the herbivores, they are the secondary consumer, and then the tertiary consumer, who are the secondary carnivores or the second levels of carnivores, who are dependent on the first level of carnivores. So that represents the fourth trophic level. So we have the first trophic level, which are the producers, second trophic level, which is the primary consumer, the third trophic level, the secondary consumer, and the fourth trophic level is the tertiary consumer. Now ecosystem also has two major types of food chains. One is the grazing food chain, that is more prevalent, where the green plants are producing the complex organic matter and the herbivores are dependent on them, and the carnivores of different levels are representing the consumers, who are all dependent or they are utilizing the nutrients obtained from the plants to the herbivores. The other one is the detritus food chain, where the source of the energy is the dead organic matter. So basically all the detrivores and the decomposers, they are responsible for the detritus food chain, where the solar light is no more the source of energy, rather the source of energy is the organic matter, rather the dead organic matter, and these organic matter which is rich in organic carbon as well as different type of nutrients. So essentially we can see that certain characteristic feature of the detritus food chain are that the loss of energy is or rather the loss of nutrients are there, not there, because in this case the nutrients are all recycled back or they are provided into the environment, and these organisms are mostly relying on the oxidation process of the organic matter rather than the reducing the carbon dioxide and utilizing the solar light present in our atmosphere. So for this part of this lecture, I would recommend these references, and these are the concluding remarks, that the ecosystem and the biosphere are defined. The ecosystem components, function and flow of energy and nutrients are discussed. Food chain and trophic levels are also introduced. Thank you.